All right, we are live for another installment of David Green Real Estate live here on YouTube. This is actually our last segment of the year, I believe. That we might be doing one around New Year's, but we're definitely not doing one next year. So excited to get into the holiday spirits and into the holiday mood. Nothing better to talk about around the holiday festivities like the federal interest rates and the Federal Reserve and Jerome Powell. I mean, that's going to be a household name, I'm sure, coming up along a lot of people. And as we introduce Mr. David Green, who's here with us tonight, I'm going to set the mood here and get people ready for the holidays. I put a little Christmas music. Can you hear that coming through, David?
Sure can.
Is it harder to get into the Christmas spirit when you are, in Hawaii in the tropics? There's not really any change in the weather or anything like that.
It's very weird. There's no cold. I mean, it's been windy the last 2 days, but yeah, it's harder to get into Christmas spirit. They put like Christmas lights on palm trees. It's like that old Corona commercial. That's about as far as it goes.
By the way, you might need to adjust your microphone because I think it's playing off of your other one. Yeah. That being said, the people that are here tonight, I see we've got about 35 people, and people are beginning to trickle in. Let us know where you're from tonight. I'm actually seeing some people from Hawaii, some people from Florida, Southern California. So I'm seeing a lot of people watching from warm areas. So we definitely have to bring the holiday spirit tonight. Jimmy, what is going on? Merry Christmas to you. Dora, Merry Christmas from Napa. Great to see you. Looks like we got Flippin' Realty from Houston. A lot of warm places today. No one, all the people who are in the cold right now are probably just hunkering in and don't want to open up their laptop lid or their iPhone to watch us. Oh, we got that YouTuber Isaac saying, "What's up? Merry Christmas." I'm loving the little use of emojis there. Okay, here we go. We got Mark from Canada, full of snow here. Very nice. The cold people are starting to chime in now. Jamie from cold New Jersey and Rosalie from Staten Island, New York. Merry Christmas to you
Kyle,
as
do you think
well.
Christmas was created to make people who live in cold climates feel better about themselves?
Yeah, I think it is a way to get through. Yes, I think absolutely it's a way to get through. Like, what's your theory on it?
That people were stuck living in cold places and they were all going to rebel and cause problems. So the government came together and said, how do we placate these people that live in miserable places so they don't move to somewhere warmer and just learn a new industry within real estate and work remotely? So they said it was about Jesus, but really it was about feeling good about living in the cold, which is why they made it like a winter Christmas, because there's nothing about snow in the Christmas story. And we really could be celebrating Jesus 365 days a year, right? So I don't know about this, but I do wonder if this isn't some form of like an okie doke to try to get people who live in freezing cold places to feel good about themselves.
I mean, I could absolutely see that. And I know even for us out here in California, man, we don't get cold as much, but we get the peppermint in our mocha. That makes me feel better about myself. I even have a little bit right here in my coffee, just a little dash to make myself, feel that happiness amongst the holiday spirits. I have not watched any Hallmark movies yet. David, I'm curious, what's your favorite Christmas movie, by the way?
Man, I mean, I'll put Elf up there. Ooh. Home Alone. Do I have a favorite Christmas movie? I used to really like that one when I was a kid with the claymation, like the Abominable Snowman.
Yeah, that was the Rudolph, right?
I think they had a couple of them.
Yeah.
Rudolph was one of them. Yeah, same types. I don't know that I have a favorite Christmas movie, though. Do you have one? You're very deep. You probably like something like It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Dude, you just called it. How'd you know that?
Because I know you, dude.
Have I told you that before?
No, you're just this like classical man stuck in a young guy's body. Like you always like things that I would have never expected someone of our generation to pick it.
Yes. Have you seen it?
No, I have. Why would I watch It's a Wonderful Life? It's such an old,
like it.
boring movie, man.
I think if you go on Amazon, I think they like created a colorized version. They were able to like take the technology and put color to it, and it's pretty good. Like, go check it out, dude. I think you would really, really like it. It has some good messages to it for sure.
I'm being judgmental, but when I hear you say that, I just picture somebody like painting a 1964 Pinto a new color, and they're like, "No, it looks cool and it goes fast now." That's what I picture.
I mean, it's pretty surprising. Anytime you see somebody take a black and white picture and put it into color, you're like, how do they know that was the color of that person's eyes? Right. And it looks really good. It's actually impressive.
We're going to get into the show soon here, everybody, but I do want to know in the comments, what would you guess is Kyle's favorite movie? Not Christmas movie, but actual movie. And Isaac, you are not allowed to spoil this by putting anything in the comments, okay?
Yes, do not.
All right, let us know what you think Kyle's favorite movie of all time actually is, and then let us know what your favorite Christmas movie is. Let us know that as well.
Please, yeah. Ken says his favorite is The Santa Claus with Tim Allen. We just watched that as a family. Great movie. And yeah, that one's a Christmas classic for sure. It's not in my top 3, but it is there. John Bartlett, is this serious? Or is this some kind of sarcastic joke? I don't think so. It's a decent movie, but it's not my favorite. The Breakfast Club, I see. Armageddon. I'm sorry. No, you guys, it's not that. I would say you're close.
They're not Armageddon. That close. There might be like one actor that's in it or something.
Well, think of like type of movie.
Yeah, I still don't see it from what I know is your favorite movie. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, you have a new favorite movie, right?
Yeah. You're thinking of that old one, huh?
Yeah, I am.
Hoosiers, right. Deep Impact.
You are close with Deep Impact and Armageddon. They are sort of circling in here.
Spill the tea, David.
His favorite movie is Interstellar. But I want you to keep guessing what his old favorite movie was before Interstellar came out. And while we're doing that, let's get to our first video here, Kyle.
Awesome. We're going to go and do that. I'm going to actually stop this wonderful music we've been listening to and put that on pause. So we've been talking a lot about a housing crash or a market crash. The economy itself is going to be crashing. We're heading for a recession. But one thing we don't really hear about is actually, could it be possible for us to be coming into what's called a soft landing? And we're going to watch a quick video here to talk about that, and then have David unpack what his thoughts are on the possibility of us coming into a soft landing. So here we go. Where'd it go? Oh, it moved to the top. Sorry about that. Here we go.
Inflation is dropping, and the Federal Reserve is holding interest rates steady, signaling the potential for
soft landing.
Soft landing.
Is this the soft landing?
A soft landing is basically economic nirvana. They require the right mix of policymaking skill and just plain economic luck.
But we don't see soft landings very often because they're hard to achieve. Here's why. Imagine inflation as an airplane descending to the ground. When a soft landing occurs, that essentially means the plane, or inflation, manages to land smoothly on the ground without any bumps or turbulence, which basically means the Federal Reserve is able to bring inflation down to its target rate, which is about 2%, without triggering a negative reaction like a recession or significantly raising the unemployment rate.
There's a little bit of a problem with the soft landing analogy. Planes land, economies don't. The economy is always moving. It's growing, it's shrinking, it's not standing still. So then the question is, if we have a soft landing, do you just stay there? That's hard to do.
In order to soft land the economy, the Fed uses its main tool to fight inflation, raising interest rates. And the Fed was, until recently, on a historic run of raising interest rates to a 22-year high after a post-pandemic strong economic rebound pushed inflation to more than 9% last year.
At today's meeting, the committee raised the target range for the federal funds rate by a 0.25 percentage point, bringing the target range to 4.75% to 5%.
When you raise interest rates, it's a blunt instrument. You don't get to fine tune how much you're going to slow down the economy. It isn't like lightly tapping on the brake on the car. You stomp on it and, things can break. The concern is that something in the economy is going to break.
The most commonly referred to example of a soft landing happened in the mid-1990s under the leadership of then Fed Chair Alan Greenspan. The Fed raised interest rates rapidly between 1994 and 1995 from 3% to 6%. Inflation and the unemployment rate both declined.
The data that have been published in the first weeks of 1995 have offered some indications that the expansion may finally be slowing from a torrid and unsustainable pace of late 1994.
But today's economic challenges are different.
Inflation was not a problem when the Fed was raising interest rates in the mid-1990s. They were doing a preemptive strike. This is a completely different scenario because the Fed has been trying to do something that's never been done before, which is soft landing the economy after a period of much higher inflation.
Soft landings are elusive for a reason, because in order to land the airplane, you have to avoid a lot of turbulence, like energy prices, a hot economy, Fed rate hikes, and financial crises.
There are so many unknowns in the economy. What's going to happen to oil prices? Are consumers suddenly going to feel like they've gotten their fill of Taylor Swift and Beyonce and they don't need to spend money anymore? They're not so confident about their income situation. Jobs are maybe harder to get, and so they pull back.
One of the primary threats to a soft landing, the Fed itself. If the Fed holds rates too tight for too long, it could risk a severe downturn. Inflation has cooled to 3.1% and the unemployment rate dropped to 3.7%, prompting the Fed to keep interest rates steady.
I have always felt, since the beginning, that there was a possibility, because of the unusual situation, that the economy could cool off in a way that enabled inflation to come down without the kind of large job losses that have often been associated with high inflation and tightening cycles.
They're in wait and see mode. They think they've probably done enough, but they don't want to declare victory or mission accomplished prematurely. It would be embarrassing and it could be painful for the economy if they said they were done and then they had to go raise interest rates again.
While the inflation rate, or the airplane, appears to be descending in the right direction, it doesn't necessarily mean the Fed has soft landed the economy. A lot could change at any given time.
If we don't have a soft landing, it's probably because we have a recession. And then the question is, how bad does it get? Is it a mild recession? The other side of that is that we don't have any kind of downturn. And in that case, the Fed would probably get nervous if inflation didn't come down enough and the economy started to regain speed. I think the reason soft landings are so difficult to achieve is they just require the right mix of luck and skill. It's hard to know without seeing the future where exactly you should set interest rates.
All right, so let's kind of rein it in here, and then we'll talk a little bit about the soft landing concept. So for those of you that didn't hear or see the news, basically what happened was this last week, Jerome Powell and the Fed came out for their last meeting of 2023 and said that they would not be increasing the Federal Reserve interest rate, nor did they make a cut. They just left it as is. But then they hinted at 3 reductions next year, which like made people super excited. Stock market just like took off, like hockey stick went up. And then the next day, the Fed came back out and was like, whoa, actually, we're going to pivot here a little bit. And we can't, it's a little bit too preemptive for us to say that 3 rate hikes are coming next year. So we're going to dive into that, break it open a little bit, talk about what that means for all of us who are trying to build wealth, primarily through real estate. But David, tell me a little bit about, because I've heard you talk about the soft landing before as well. What's your idea or just your thoughts on that concept in general?
It's like a political wool over the eyes that they're trying to pull. They always say we want a soft landing, like the person said, and it gives you this feeling of safety that isn't realistic. You can't create safety the way that the government wants to make you think that they can, right? Like when COVID happened, everybody was terrified. The government wants to make it sound like it's okay. We got it under control. We're going to do something to stop it, which became like a mask mandate. And then more and more people started saying, I'm a scientist and masks are not going to keep you safe if this is actually a virus that's going to kill you. But it still felt comforting to be told that, like, well, if I wear a mask, I could be safe. What's interesting is masks do slow down the spreading of the virus if you have it.
True.
They don't protect you from it if somebody else has it, right? But most people are wearing masks to protect themselves, not to protect other people. Same thing with this. They made a whole bunch of money, a crazy amount of it, and it caused crazy inflation, which stops everybody from building wealth, basically. And they don't want to come out and say, yeah, that's what we had to do to keep the economy from crashing when we shut it all down. So they give you this illusion that we can create a soft landing where you won't even notice it. We won't go into a recession. We won't go into a depression, and they can't. We've already seen in a lot of industries, like devastation has been going on. It's not talked about all the time, but it's very hard, like within the real estate transactional community. Loan officers have been losing their jobs. They've all been getting laid off. Real estate agents have been really struggling. I think overall, from the numbers that Kyle and I see, we're probably somewhere between 30 and 45% of the volume of what we were doing when things were rocking and rolling. That's a very significant difference. Like, I'd say most people I know are making about a third of what they were making when the economy is doing well. And these are the people that were doing good. The people that were just limping along, they're just making nothing. Yeah. Okay. So we've already seen some really, really rough parts of the economy. You're seeing a lot of real estate syndications, multifamily properties, commercial elements. They're all being foreclosed or heading towards foreclosure or fire sales, or capital calls where the investors have to bring more money in there because we raise rates so fast. So it is, don't believe it every time a politician says we're going to create a soft landing. They make it sound like we're just going to twist some dials here and pull some levers here and everything's going to be fine. Nothing works that way. There's no way to take something this complicated and make it smooth.
Is there any way to make it positive, right? You see the comments in here. Joshua says, sheesh, speaking of depressing AF. I've seen a lot of people that are sort of depressed by a lot of, what's happening in the economy and in the direction. It's not all roses and beauty that we've seen in the past.
I think our perspective is something we can control. I think too often as humans, we get lulled into this delusion that the world is a safe, friendly place and we deserve for it to stay that way. Like, it's never been that way. If food stops growing and we don't have any other way to grow food, we can go into a famine. If one little virus takes off, it can shut down the entire world. Human beings are not incredibly resilient creatures. We're very sensitive and delicate creatures. And as long as we keep printing money and blowing up a credit cycle, it gives this appearance like the world's a safe, happy place. But it's not. We should all be waking up every day like an animal that something else is trying to kill. And you should do your best to be good to your fellow man. But at the same time, you should do your best to protect yourself and your family and other people through gaining in knowledge and saving money and working really hard and preparing for rainy days. We all know that. Well, if a politician wants to get elected, it's very easy for them to tell you, it's okay, I have a plan. Just follow me. And that's what you're going to vote for. Whoever is going to make you feel safer. So to your question there, Kyle, it is depressing. It should be depressing. It should be concerning. It shouldn't be like terrifying you, because there's always people that need work done. And if you're willing to do work, you'll make a living. But does that mean that everyone in the world should have an iPhone and brand new clothes all the time and be taking 7 vacations a year and live in a 4,000 square foot house? Like, no, that's just a standard of living that we've sort of gotten used to lately. That's not an honest one.
Yeah. And if you want that lifestyle, that's fine, but like, you're gonna have to work for it, right? It's not gonna be something that is just given to you or that you're entitled to get by any means. So this next video we're going to talk about actually summarizes really well. It's only a couple minutes long, exactly what happened with the Fed when they came out, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some different people's takes on that and what that means for real estate and for the economy in general. So let me go ahead and pull this up and get it playing.
And the decision, and for that, we go to Steve Leisman.
The Federal Reserve leaving interest rates unchanged at 5.25% to 5.5%, a unanimous decision in the December meeting. The Fed says growth has slowed from the strong third quarter pace, saying inflation has eased over the past year, but remains elevated. It is the first time they said anything positive about inflation for a very long time in the statement. And they backed off somewhat their bias to hike, saying it was now determining the extent of any additional policy firming, inserting the word any into the statement for the first time. They lowered their 2024 Fed funds outlook to 4.6% from 5.1%, so half a point down, forecasting on average for a Fed official 80 basis points of rate cuts next year. It had forecast just 50 basis points from a higher level. Of course, they got rid of the expectation for the forecast for an additional rate hike this year. That's gone. They lowered their inflation outlook for this year to 3.2 from 3.7 for core PCE. That's down by 50 basis points. They hit their 2% inflation target now, maybe a little bit earlier, sort of towards 2025 or the end of 2025. And they see below trend growth at 1.4% next year, a tenth less than the September forecast. Unemployment rate seen at 4.1 next year, about 0.4 higher than the September forecast. And they repeat in the statement that job gains have moderated but remain strong. Now, there's something in the dot plot that I think is worth pointing out. While that median did come down from 5.1 to 4.6, there are 5 Fed officials who are below that 4.6 number who see a full 100 basis points of rate cuts next year, and they're even more dovish into 2025. If you remember the September forecast, there had been at least one Fed official who was above 6%. That's gone, and the top of the dot plot now for next year is now 5.40. So I would say that the Federal Reserve today took a step towards the market rather than the market taking a step towards the Fed. I wouldn't say it's an all clear on this, but the Fed definitely backing off plans to hike additionally, or making certain that it plans to hike, and also forecasting more in the way of rate cuts next year for the average Fed official than they had in September. Tyler?
All right, so let's break this down a little bit, David. Let's break out the crystal ball and talk about 2024. So the Fed has come out and said, hey, we are definitely not going to be increasing the interest rates anymore. If anything, we're going to be decreasing the rates in 2024. What does this mean as a whole? What does this mean for real estate investors, people who maybe have been sitting on the sidelines and they want to jump into the market? They're just not quite sure.
It's with investing the last decade, it's been pick your poison. It's never easy. It's either there's really low rates and tons of inflation, which makes borrowing money more affordable, and it makes your investment safer because the odds of it staying at a low price are low. It's going to go up. So we've had a crazy amount of people that wanted to invest in real estate. Then we had rates go up really quick. And so it stopped how many people were trying to buy real estate. But in order for prices to go down, like we've talked about before, you have to have homes that sit on the market for a long time with nobody buying them. So you rarely ever see prices tick down. They tend to crash down because you have to have a property that sits on the market for 90 days or more with nobody wanting it before the sellers drop their prices. And if every property is doing that, then the prices are just going to keep dropping and keep dropping and keep dropping. In 2024, if we do see rates go back down, it depends how far they go, okay? So I need to come up with an analogy to describe this, but if you imagine that rates are, say, 8% and at their bottom rates were around 3%, so you've got this difference. If rates drop from 8 to 7 to 6 to 5, you will get more buying, but you won't get crazy buying, okay? Mm-hmm. Crazy buying is only possible when you have a crazy amount of inventory to buy and you have a crazy amount of people that want to buy them. You've got all these people that locked in at 3%. So in order for the person who has inventory at 3% rates, you got to get rates close to 4 or at 4 before they're even going to consider selling, right? Mm-hmm. So if they drop prices if they drop rates a little bit and it comes to here, you're still not going to have a lot of inventory flood the market. You're just going to have more offers than we get. Rates have to go all the way down to where they're very close to where rates are right now, to where your mom might say, okay, I'd sell my house for this price and buy another one for the same price, but I'm getting a similar rate. So I just get a house I like more. If you don't have that, the people who own homes with rates they like aren't going to put them on the market unless they have to. They're compelled to. That's a small percentage of people. So while lowering rates will help the market, it will create more competition. It's like a bonus point that they hit if they can get low enough to where rates used to be. So if they really want to spur things, they have to drop rates all the way down to where they were at like record lows. And it's tough for me to see them going that low.
So if it's just a gradual drop, do you see there being an uptick of buyers and still maybe some more listings, but just not going to be the big flood like a lot of people might anticipate?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. If you're the kind of person that buys real estate like you're playing the stock market, you're going to be confused. You're not going to know when to jump in or when to jump out. The people that are going to do well for the near future are going to be the ones that take the long game like we've been talking about. So if you bought something this year and it's like rough, it's not doing great, but you got an okay mediocre deal and you're in an 8.5% interest rate, if they drop to 6 or 5.5, that's not going to flood the market with inventory, but it is going to let you refi into a significantly cheaper mortgage. Okay. So now you have done well because you bought at 8.5, and now you refinance it at 5.5, and boom, you just refied into cash flow. If you are waiting until it's 5.5, thinking we'll all wait till then because it's going to cash flow, it will be a lot of other buyers trying to buy that house. So you won't be able to buy it at the same price. You're going to spend more than the person did before. Obviously, we don't know when we buy the house where rates are going to go. And that's why I'm saying you got to play the long game, because what you get into isn't probably going to be where you stay, but you don't know when that's going to happen. So you have to buy it and be in a strong enough financial position that you can weather the storm of not having a great investment right away. And if it's 1 year, 2 years, or 10 years, you refinance when rates go down, and you're going to get equity when the property goes up. So either you exit when rates go down and you can sell and make money, or you refinance when rates go down and you can hold on to the asset and it now cash flows. We used to be able to buy into cash flow. That's getting harder and harder to do. Now it may be you buy into the area and you buy the right price and then you refinance into cash flow at some point in the future.
That's fair. And then I would imagine that we are going to see a lot more, maybe not a lot more, but we're going to see more first-time home buyers start to enter the market in 2024, especially if we start to see more mortgage interest rates drop, because a lot of them have likely been sitting on the sidelines for the last 6 to 12 months, waiting for what exactly could be coming up. Home affordability is now a better thing, right? There's still going to be less inventory to choose from, but there's still potential opportunities for them compared to what they would have seen maybe in 2023.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. You'll have a little bit more options, but if you're the type of person who wants to buy a house and you want a good investment and you want to be in a good area and you want to be picky and you want a floor plan that you like and you want to be near the restaurants you like, you just never get a house. It would be nice if we lived in a world like that, where you could buy a house that you love, that was in the neighborhood you want, that was at the price you want, that was at something you're comfortable with. But you got to remember that would not now be a good investment.
Right.
The prices of the homes aren't going to be going up if you could have all the options to pick what you want. So you typically either get something that's comfortable to live in, or you get something that'll be a good investment, but rarely do you get both at the same time.
So you just got to level set with yourself. You got to realize that the days of being able to pick, 20 winners and just pick the one you want really isn't there. You got to be a little bit more realistic in terms of your expectations and what you can get in your specific market.
I like that. Joshua here said, at what point does BRRRR come back into play? Okay. It still works. I just want you guys to stretch out everything that you've been taught by me on the podcast or through my books before. When the market's doing crazy good, the goal is to BRRRR in 6 months or something. So you buy a property, you rehab it, and within 6 months, you then refinance it, get your money out, and buy your next property, okay? Take that same principle, but stretch it out of 6 months and stretch it into 5 years or 6 years. You buy a property, you fix it up, you create equity, you don't refinance it right away. You refinance when rates drop to a point that they make sense. So you're still getting your capital out, you're still investing in real estate, but you're not doing it as quickly as what you used to do. You just have to give something up. You're always going to give something up in these scenarios, okay? So if we don't know where rates are going to be, you can still BRRRR, but you can't BRRRR every 6 months. That was like the ideal anyways. That was a really difficult thing to pull off that we were able to pull off because the market was incredibly advantageous for us. So the principles are the same. The execution of it is a little bit different, which means, Kyle, should you sit around for 6 years while you're waiting to refinance doing nothing and just complaining? Or do you think that we should use that time to make more money and save more money?
100%. And build skills. Yeah.
Yeah. And build skills. Thank you. That's a great point to put out there.
Yeah, I thought you were this close to some kind of dating analogy when you were talking about like you have to give something up in order to get what you want. I thought there was one coming right there.
I'm sure one of them will come. It's just too, Brandon used to say to me, everything's a funnel. I don't know if you ever heard him say that, Kyle, but it's like one of his common things. Like everything's a funnel because he is a marketer. So he looks at the world through funnels. He's like, all right, if I get X amount of people to see my thing, X amount of people will click on something, X amount of people will show up, X amount of people will be committed, X amount of people will end up in my tribe or whatever. So I need to start with this number and it'll whittle down to that. And it's true. Dating can work that way. Like if you date enough people, you're just going to hit pay dirt at some point, right? I tend to look at everything through supply and demand. Dating is a function of that, right? Like there's so many types of men that women are going to want. There's so many types of women that men are going to want. Everyone's going to want to get the best deal that they can, right? Just like every buyer typically says, how do I get the most for my money? Most people that are dating don't say, how do I offer more? They say, how do I get the best for what I'm willing to offer right now, right? I'm willing to put in X amount of effort and I want to get the best I can for that effort, which usually means looking for some advantage. How do I put my best foot forward? That's a lie. How do I present myself better than I really am? How do I put a filter on my pictures? How do I hide my crazy? How do I hide my baggage? Right? Like that's typically what happens. I know, Kyle, you haven't dated in like 20 years, but for those of us that are stuck doing it, that's usually what you're seeing, right? But it's not the best approach. The best approach is how do I become the best person I could be and attract the best person that I can attract? Like the housing market really should work that way. Rather than saying, how do I rip off some old lady and get her property for less? We should just say, how do I become wealthier? How do I have more to offer so I can get the property that I want? And I do tend to look at most things through that supply demand dynamic. So different dating strategies work in different markets and different real estate strategies work in different markets. But if you understand the fundamentals of how they work, you can put yourself in a position where you'll do well over the long term.
Yeah. And speaking of markets, right, the prices in certain markets are predicted to go up next year. Some of them are predicted to go down. Nationally, overall, they're expected to slow down in terms of appreciation, which is good. We want that. We don't want the rampant inflation because that creates a ton of issues, even with the appreciation of our properties. I'm going to jump in and share a quick video here from Graham Stephan where he talks specifically about the Fed and the potential rate decreases for next year and how that's going to affect housing prices.
5.5% year over year, and month over month, they increased by 0.6% in September alone. As they explained, home prices increased in almost all 50 states. Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, New Jersey recorded some of the highest annual appreciation rates, with the worst markets coming in for Hawaii and the District of Columbia, posting negative rates of 0.9 and 0.8%. Or basically, even the hardest hit markets weren't even that bad. Why? Well, the general consensus is that the higher mortgage rates go, the less likely existing homeowners are to sell, since more than 62% of them already have rates locked in below 4%. This means the higher interest rates go, the more unaffordable it is to move, which means less inventory hits the market as a result, and the more buyers have to pay when demand outstrips supply. Now, don't worry, not all hope is lost for buyers in 2024. That's because Goldman Sachs believes that the days of insane price gains are over, and starting soon, we'll likely go back to a 2% type of home appreciation environment, which is roughly around the trend of the last 30 years or so. A separate analyst also seconds this by saying that national home prices will fall 1.7% in 2024 for the first time in a decade, although that doesn't mean that every area will go down. In fact, as they clarify, of the 100 large metros included in the report, 63 are likely to see prices rise. This includes areas like Detroit, Rochester, New York, Des Moines, Iowa, Hartford, Connecticut, and Toledo, Ohio, some of the biggest potential gainers, with Austin, Texas, St. Louis, Spokane, Washington, and San Antonio's taking the spots for the worst potential losses. Now, separate from that, Realtor.com also expects home prices to fall in 2024 as buyers wait for mortgage rates to drop. For instance, if you believed that mortgages would be cheaper 6 months from now than they are today, why not wait to see if you get a better deal? But with many housing experts believing that affordability will get better in 2024, there is the realization that this is only the tip of the iceberg, because then we have another topic that's worth discussing, and that would be the stock market. But before we go into that, I do think it's really important to mention that stock prices don't always behave rationally. Like, the saying.
All right. So with that, we're definitely seeing some fluctuation in prices. One of the things that I continually go back to, David, is educating my clients, especially the ones that I work with here in Sacramento, on what is actively happening in the market. Because I think a lot of people assume that because the interest rates are sort of high right now, that there's not that many buyers out there. There's not that many people that want to buy. Therefore, I can go negotiate and get whatever I want on a deal. Remember that property I was telling you about earlier this week? I think it had how many offers did it have on the one that had an exorbitant amount? What was it back then when I told
60 something at the time?
Yeah. So let me just share this with you guys because this is crazy. This is a real life example of a property that is on the market. It's still active. If you're watching this right now and you want to throw your hat in the ring, you absolutely can, because it's crazy. Let me zoom in here. This property right now sits at 96 offers received. That is the highest I've ever seen.
How do they track that? Do people have to put the offer that they get into the MLS somewhere?
This agent uses some kind of, it's not an auction, right? Sometimes they do auctions.
But they force you to submit your offer through this site.
This portal thing.
That looks like it's from 1998. I got you.
I know. I was thinking that same thing. It's coded in HTML. But yeah, it's got 96 offers, right? So do you want to be number 97 and compete with all the other offers? It's crazy, right? And it's listed at 200K. It's, not actually that low compared to other houses in the area. I mean, it is significantly low, but it's not like a tenth of the price, right? We're not talking about a $2 million home or anything like that. But to me, that shows that there are still people, there are still investors, there are still people that want to actively buy despite the low or the high interest rates, right? Despite the climate. Yeah, there's probably a lot of cash offers. I get it. There's probably a lot of flippers, but people still want to go out, right? They still want to put offers on homes. So to me, that's pretty wild. Just the fact that in your head, you can't just assume that nobody else wants the property. It's not like it was back in 08, 09 when people literally didn't want properties. People still want properties today.
I just imagine how many of those buyers said to their agent when the agent was like, it's getting a lot of offers, you're gonna have to go over. How many people said, Well, let's just write it at 199 and see what happens. Like how
Mhm.
how many of those conversations were happening? Because that's what every buyer always thinks. Like maybe Brad Pitt will just show up at my workplace and fall in love with me like they always do in the rom-com movies. Like let's just see what happens rather than looking at it practically.
Yeah, I've never seen, and you can tell me if you've ever seen this. Have you ever seen a multiple offer scenario with 5, 6, 7+ offers that where it's gone at list or below?
No. I mean, it almost can't do that unless when people get deeper into the house, they realize there's a problem and then they back out. But if
Yeah,
there's
or you
nothing
can
wrong with it,
negotiate. Yeah, like
yeah,
some unknown thing, like it had foundation issues. Yeah, something you didn't see coming for sure. But I was blown away when I saw that 96 offers. That's crazy.
yeah, and growing, right?
Yeah.
So that's just,
yeah.
I mean, that tells you that there's so many people that are in pre-approved in that price range. That's their only option.
Mhm.
Right. So we'll probably see, like, you know, you and I have seen a little bit of the TIC thing where people are taking a chunk of their house, like the ADU or an extension of it, and trying to split it off from the main house and sell that piece of the home to someone else. So basically, you don't own the land, you own access to use that part of the property. So if I have a property with an ADU in the back, I could sell the ADU to somebody else, but because it's not its own lot, it doesn't have its own assessor parcel number, its own taxes, you would just be buying the right to use it. Similar to when you buy a condo, you're not always necessarily buying like the building itself. You're buying the right to use that condo in the building.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the direction that we're headed for sure. Doing the old it's a kind of a different method of a house hack to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think if rates go down, Kyle, we are probably likely to see another bloodbath where people jump back in. And if rates are at 5% or even low sixes, but definitely in the fives, you'll see a lot of activity. People will be buying houses again. It's just enough to where you'll see they start to cash flow and you'll get multiple offers on properties. We'll go back to what we were before. And this should serve as a really good warning of how fickle real estate can be. The tides can change so quickly, which is why we don't talk about fancy methods. We don't talk about shortcuts. We don't talk about secret strategies that give you an advantage. We talk about principles. What location are you buying in? What type of neighborhood are you getting? Is this a property that's flexible that you can turn it into more than one use? Or is there only one way to use this property? Can you improve the property by adding square footage to it in case you have to sell it or something like that? Those are things people really need to look at because winning in real estate is all about surviving for the long term. You have to be able to survive for a long period of time. That's where wealth's going to come from. And survival tactics mean having multiple options.
Yeah, I got some buyers right now that we just got under contract on a duplex in a decent neighborhood, not far from where my kids go to school, not far from Trader Joe's. Completely vacant, which you rarely see a completely vacant duplex on a big lot with the ability to add not one, but 2 additional ADUs if they wanted, right? So they've got this property with 2 units. What's that?
They advertise it as the ability to build 2 ADUs.
Nobody advertised it that way. We figured that out when we called the city to see how many ADUs we could build if we wanted to, right? So they've got the opportunity to potentially take this property and turn it into 4 units because you never see duplexes are never on like bigger lots, rarely. But the fact that we found something on a larger lot, there's a lot of potential there to turn that thing into a nice cash flowing property for the long term.
Yeah, and it'll be the people that bought property in the right areas that 4 or 5 years later, when rents have risen and maybe rates have dropped at some point during that period of time, that refinance, like when all the things work together for you, boom, you end up with a really good deal. It just used to be that you could get all those things when you first bought, and we were spoiled for choice. And we've learned the hard way how quickly that can change. So don't fall for the gimmicks of like, I've only got $12,000 and I need to turn this into $1 million. Like I heard somebody do on TikTok. That's just setting yourself up to fail.
Yeah, that's tough. It is. It's really tough because, and I think the younger generations are going to have a hard time learning that because you're going to have to show up day one and you're going to have to work incredibly hard. That's one of your success principles. We've actually been going over that in the Spartan League. David is talking about David's success principles from your book, Pillars. And that's a huge part is, number one, being able to help others, but number two, being able to work insanely hard. There's no substitute for hard work. And if you don't have the skills up front, that's okay, because you can come in, you can always work hard day one.
You almost need that. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. Like, real estate is tough, just like a lot of other things are. And if you come looking for the shortcut, it's almost like a guaranteed way to lose. And real estate, when you lose harder than other things, man. It can hurt really bad. It's not like you bought $10,000 of stocks and so you could lose $10,000.
Yeah.
Your losses are minimized. You could put $10,000 down on a house that then the air conditioner breaks, the roof goes out, the tenants throw a party, trash your house, and then don't pay rent. It takes 4 or 5 months to get them evicted. You've been making mortgage payments that entire time. Now you got to go fix up this entire property that, by the way, once it's fixed up, probably isn't going to bring in a ton of cash flow anyways. Like, it can hurt really bad, which is why you need reserves and you need to be good at making money and saving money before you get into this.
Absolutely. All right. So we're going to jump in. Speaking of the future, we're going to talk about 2024 and what goes into that. We're going to watch a video here from Andre Jick. He's going to talk about what could potentially happen in 2024.
Jerome Powell at the FOMC meeting.
Look at and remember a card in the middle of the deck. You got one?
Yeah.
Watch. Hear that? Check this out.
Yeah, it's the old classic magic trick, rip and dip. Tutorial dropping soon. So a lot just happened this week because the Illuminati, aka the Federal Reserve, just held their Federal Open Market Committee. And for now, interest rates are going to stay the same between 5.25 and 5.5%. But what's also kind of crazy is that while all of this is happening, JP Morgan's like, we think Ethereum is going to outperform Bitcoin next year. I'll take pumping bags that have already been loaded for 2,000, Alex. But the craziest part about all this is that despite interest rates being at their 22-year highs, the investment markets are going way, way up and setting record highs.
Good day to look at your 401k, people. The Federal Reserve signaled a possible drop in interest rates next year, and that sent the stock market soaring to an all-time record high. The Dow stock index jumped more than 500 points yesterday, landing above 37,000 for the first time ever. That's what a record. Kyle? Signs that the economy may be moving in a better.
When I hear that good news from the Fed led to the stock market exploding, there's something there that isn't what they're reporting. Like, you can tell if good news can lead to immediate increases in the stock market, that only happens when people dump money into the stock market. So what that tells you is there is a lot of money waiting to go somewhere, right? If good news came out and nothing changed, that might tell you there's not a whole lot of gas ready to be dumped on the fire. There isn't a lot of currency in people's savings accounts or whatever to go somewhere, or that wealthy people aren't liquid right now. But when you hear, hey, they dropped rates and people thought the economy is going to be good, and immediately the stock market goes up, that tells you there's a ton of people with capital sitting on the sidelines. And the minute that they heard, oh, the rates might be going down, the economy could do better, that means that companies will make more money, they immediately jump into the stock market and put all that capital. And if you see the same thing with real estate, let me say that another way. And if that is true, you should expect to see the same thing with real estate. If rates go down and immediately, boom, 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 everybody's buying houses, that tells you that there's been money on the sidelines the whole time. So for the people that keep saying, like, there's going to be a bloodbath, just wait, you're going to be buying houses for pennies on the dollar, that will never happen if there's a ton of capital that's just waiting to jump into the market, because they will scoop up that inventory before it sits for the 120 days that it needs to for the prices to come down where you're going to buy it for pennies on the dollar.
Fair point. Speaking of, I see a comment asking what is David going to be focusing on in 2024? Well, you actually can show up next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific. Go to davidgreen24.com/2024 and you can sign up. David's putting on a free webinar. I think it's like a 90-minute webinar. We're going to be doing some live Q&A right here on this platform, talking specifically about how to best prepare yourself for 2024 and how to be best successful, where David's going to be focusing, what he's going to be doing, and what his mindset's going to be going into 2024. So if you guys want, head on over to davidgreen24.com/2024. We do have limited capacity. This is not like one of those things where we just like try to say that to get people to sign up. Literally, our software only allows us to get a couple hundred people in there, and I think we're already at like 125. And David just released that and opened that up yesterday. So go check it out. Anything else you want to add on that point, David?
Oh, that's exactly what we'll be talking about. So join the webinar and spread the word to your friends.
Cool.
In a better direction.
Now, the reason why all the investment markets are like, the everything rally is here, is because the Papa Bank, aka the Federal Reserve, is now signaling to the rest of the world that most likely next year they're going to start lowering their interest rates. Now, even though the market is reacting to this positively and it's going way, way up, the truth is the market is completely separate from the rest of the economy. And depending on which side of the economy you're looking at, things aren't necessarily doing better because things are still expensive. And even though inflation has come way down and it's lower than it used to be, wage growth still hasn't kept up with that inflation. So in today's video, I want to share with you the Fed's plan in 2024 and what they'll do to interest rates and how much they'll lower by, and how those interest rates will have an impact on real estate, stocks, crypto, and most importantly, everybody's jobs. So with that said, let's get into it. Hi, my name is Andre Jick. Hope you're doing well. Come for the finance and stay for inflation. And speaking of inflation, some comments have said that my head looks inflated as compared to the rest of my body. But the truth is, if you ever actually saw me in real life, you'd see that my head actually looks like this. See, this is no filter on. The rest of my videos actually have a filter to squeeze my head back down to normal proportions. And I wanted to save you from that jarring image of my actual head size. So in the economy this week, we got the CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, or the rate at which prices are going up. And the latest number shows that inflation has come down to around 3.1%. Now this is for November because remember, data is always 1 month behind reality. The truth is that today, December's inflation numbers are probably even lower, but we won't know what they are until January 11th, as it says on the BLS.gov website. Now, if you want to look at the unofficial numbers, not from the government, we can look at something like trueflation.com, which shows today it's closer to 3%, which is more or less in line with official numbers. But the point is, inflation's coming down from its peak of 9% in June of 2022, which is good. And the reason inflation's coming down is because gas prices are lower, but some things are actually still more expensive.
For example, eating out at restaurants got more expensive, so did rent for apartments. And get this, car insurance is up more than 19% year over year.
Believe it or not, right now, it's roughly $1,000 cheaper to rent than to buy the equivalent. The average rental rate is a little over $2,100 a month, and the average 30-year mortgage payment is a little over $3,300 a month. Now, the good news is that rent is a lagging indicator by about a year, and rents are becoming cheaper, but the bad news is wage growth still isn't keeping up with some of the inflation.
Taking a look at a recent CBS News poll, 76% of Americans say their income is just not keeping pace with inflation. More than 60% say the nation's economic condition is bad.
Now, all of this is obviously because of interest rates, but here's where it gets really interesting. Because interest rates are responsible for more than just what happens to the investment world, but also how many people get to keep their jobs. Now, as of today, interest rates are going to stay at a 22-year high, but where they'll go next is divided into two alternate realities. What the Fed is telling us and what the market is telling us are two very different things. The Federal Reserve is telling us that they'll consider cutting interest rates next year, maybe 3 times or so. What the market is telling us is that they'll lower interest rates as many as 5, maybe 6 times. So who do we believe? Do we believe the Fed or do we believe the market? Generally speaking, the Fed's job is not to reveal their actual plan to us. The Illuminati don't do that. Their job is to manage our expectations so we don't go out today and spend all our money and cause more inflation to happen. The market's job is to accurately price itself today based on what it thinks about the future and what will happen. Now, the key to understanding and hearing what the market is whispering to us, it's not shouting, it's whispering. And the key to knowing what it is knowing where to look and understanding what you're actually looking at. So let me show you this chart. It's going to seem a little complicated at first, but I promise I'll just explain it right after. Using something called the CME Fed Watch tool, which you can find yourself, it shows the Fed will most likely not raise their interest rates in January. And we know this because today rates are 5.25 to 5.5%, and it shows an 80% chance that they'll exactly stay the same, 5.25 to 5.5%. But moving on, if you click in March, you can see that in March, the odds are high that it will go down by 0.25%. And this should happen again in May, then again in June, again in July, and again in September, and then possibly maybe in December. So the final rate will fall somewhere between 3.75 and 4.25%, or for the nerds, between 375 basis points and 425 basis points. That is a difference of 1.5% lower than where we are today. So the question is, will this actually play out in the way that I just showed you from the data? And the answer is, if you ever watched the Loki series where there was the sacred timeline, the farther into the future you try to look, the more it splits into alternate realities. And what I'm saying is, if you're trying to predict the short-term future, that's kind of easy because maybe you're making one or two assumptions. But the farther you try to look, the more that prediction is based on an assumption, on an assumption, of an assumption, of an assumption, of an assumption. And the harder it becomes to accurately predict. But assuming that it plays out the way the market is predicting rather than what the Fed is telling us, then yes, they should cut the interest rates by somewhere of 1.5%, probably. But the more important question is, how will those rate cuts actually affect the investment world? And most importantly, people's jobs. So first, let's talk about the jobs, because jobs are like an excited puppy. And I say excited puppy because we just got this boy in and we haven't named him yet, but you're the first to see him. And I'll take some name recommendations in the comments. Let me know. How can you say no to this cute boy? Unlike jobs, the market is kind of like a puppy. Anytime it hears rate cuts, it starts jumping up. People want to invest their money because they anticipate a bull market. This is also why you see the greed index is up right now. And that makes a lot of sense. When you think of the Federal Reserve lowering interest rates, you think it's cheaper to borrow money, people start to invest more, there's more jobs around, and good times are ahead. But be careful of how you think about this, because that's not what data shows will happen. Instead, the data shows that anytime the Federal Reserve begins their rate cut cycle, that's when people begin losing jobs. In fact, if you look at the rate cut cycle since the 1950s, the first interest rate drop happens 3 months before people start losing jobs. And this has been true of virtually every single recession that has ever happened. And on average, unemployment goes up to 7.5%, which is roughly twice as high as what it is today. Now, this time could be different, and maybe the Fed could achieve the soft landing that they want, which is when people don't lose their jobs, but that would be a first for the Federal Reserve in history. And if you're wondering, well, why does lowering interest rates cause people to lose their jobs? The answer is it actually doesn't. Remember, sometimes it takes over a year for the full pain of people losing jobs to start taking effect. But now let's talk about how these interest rates will impact the investment world, starting with arguably the most important thing you could ever buy, which is a house. So how much does a 1.5% lower rate actually save you? So if we take the market's assumption that by the end of 2024, interest rates will go down by 1.5%, that means for every $100,000 in mortgage cost, your payment would go down by roughly $88 a month. That's assuming your interest rate is 1.5% lower than what it is today. So for the median purchase price of a house today, which is about $430,000, having a 1.5% lower interest rate means that will lower your monthly payment by about $377, assuming 0% down. So almost $400 a month is a lot of money in savings, but you also have to remember those savings will apply to everybody else who will have the same idea of buying the same house with their lower 1.5% interest rate, which means more competition, which means assuming inventory levels stay the same, means that home prices will probably increase. So I did some more calculations to hopefully help you better understand how much they would have to increase by for the lower rate to make no sense. Hopefully that makes sense. So if you have a 1.5% lower rate, the amount of savings that you'll have will be completely wiped away if home prices appreciate by 20%. Now, I am not saying, to be clear, that if the Fed lowers rates by 1.5 next year, that home prices will explode 20%. There's no way that's going to happen, because even in 2021, when the Fed dropped rates to 0, home prices appreciated by 18%, which I don't think we'll ever see again. So if rates go down by only 1.5, I don't think homes will appreciate by 20%. All I'm saying is that 20% is sort of like your buffer zone, after which point you're not getting any savings, you're just paying more for a house. Now, when it comes to all the other stuff like stocks and crypto, for example, here's what I think I can confidently say, which is...
All right, so we'll pause it there. For the stocks and crypto people, you can go watch a little bit more in depth. I just want to end it there for time's sake. So David, what are your thoughts? We don't watch a lot of Andre in here. I think Andre brings some good points, and he's obviously got some humorous parts as well. What are your thoughts on his logic between, hey, if the interest rates drop 1.5%, you've got a 20% buffer in appreciation?
Yeah, I thought there was some logic to it. That was some pretty good stuff. I like the way that he presented it. It also sort of gives you an apples comparison of, if you're just looking at payment, would you rather buy at today's prices at a higher rate, or would you rather get a lower rate and pay 20% more? Because your payment's going to be the same. Yeah. I think most people, if you ask them, and I'm one of those people, I'd rather get a better price and a higher rate.
Oh, yeah.
Because I have the option to refinance down. I also have the option, if prices go up, to get out. If you get the higher price and the lower rate, you don't have an option to refi if rates go down, because they're already down, and you don't have an option to sell if prices go up, because you already paid at the higher price, right? So even though they start off at the same level, you do have more options with the market that we're in right now. Now, this assumes that rates would go down. What if they go up?
Mm-hmm.
Rates go up. Now it's like you got to flip that on its head, right? Now you did buy in the market where the rates were lower, and so you lose those options. It's also worth noting that this is not the Fed saying we are going to drop rates in 2024. It's easy to believe that, but they're basically projections of what banks think the Fed is going to do based on the direction that unemployment and other economics are headed, based on what the Fed has said they will do if those things happen. Okay. That's a lot of speculation. The Fed telling us, if unemployment sticks to this point, we will do this. If it gets better, we will do that. Right? We don't know that they're actually going to follow through with that. I mean, anybody who's ever had their mom or dad say, can we go here? And they said, maybe, you know what maybe means. It might not happen. Right? So I don't think we should make financial decisions like assuming rates are going to go down. But I do think that you can say it is more likely that they're going to go down than that they're going to go up.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. And obviously recognizing from their perspective, they're not going to overpromise, because if they do, that's going to make them look really bad too. And so we have to be aware of the things that they say, the things that they let on. That's probably why they backed up really quickly and pivoted from when they said, yeah, we're projecting 3 rate reductions next year. And then the next day they're like, nah, we're not actually, because they know they would look really, really bad.
There's also, there's also an element where they're not independently making these decisions. They could be presenting themselves as the ones making the decisions, but the president or another impactful politician could be behind the scenes having his cabinet tell them, this is what you're going to do. So it might be low unemployment and everything's going great, and they decide, no, we're going to keep rates high until our president wins, and then we're going to lower them so that he looks really good. Or we're going to wait until it's voting season, and then we're going to lower the rate so that the economy looks like it's doing great to help our, I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but you do have to work that into your projections that this could be an element of it.
Oh, no, that's a great way to look at it. I mean, at the end of the day, there is always going to be some sort of political, positioning and moving and influence coming in from any position, right? That's not a position I don't think I would want to be in. Would you ever want to be the Federal Reserve chairman and kind of like having all this influence, but all this pressure coming on you at the same time? It's kind of like the Fauci kind of position too, where, there can be a lot of power involved, but there's also a lot of influence and a lot of people telling you from both sides, like what you should be doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can't win, because if inflation takes off, you look like you're the bad guy. And if you cause a recession from raising rates, you look like you're the bad guy. You're always going to be the bad guy to somebody.
Yeah. So or if you save the economy, it'll always be like, no, that was actually the President Biden or whoever the president is at that time. Oh, that was actually them. He saved the economy. So like, you can't be the hero, but you also can only be the enemy.
That's a great point also. So we as investors, we're not sitting here saying what we believe the government should do. We're saying you don't know what they're going to do. So how do you position your assets so that you're in the best position to make adjustments when the changes happen?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Be aware of the game. Be aware of what's going on. Eyes wide open. Be adaptable. Be moldable. Make the changes. Speaking of changes, we're going to shift here as we sort of close out this evening. David, have you seen Tesla's new robot that they've come out with that they're teasing right now?
No, I've seen the robot. A couple of people have them in Hawaii that look like a dog. Have you seen that one?
Oh, no, I haven't. Tell me
It's
about
like
that.
a remote control car, but it's like a dog on 4 legs that are kind of high, and it like walks around and jumps around and stuff. But I haven't seen what you're saying.
That's pretty interesting. This one looks pretty cool. So they first came out with one, I think, last year. They called it Bumblebee from Transformers, and now they've released a video of this newest one. It looks pretty crazy, pretty realistic. I thought it was actually just somebody walking around in it. And this one is called Optimus, but I thought this would be kind of fun as we also present on new things that are coming out technology-wise, but really just how quickly the world is changing. So let's check out Optimus.
Awesome, dude. Let's look at this.
It's like an Apple commercial.
Yeah, it does.
Pretty crazy. What are your thoughts? Initial reactions, David?
I don't like how we are looking at something that might as well be a remote control car, but I'm projecting human motives and emotions onto it because it looks like a person. It's hard for my brain to not see a human being when they make it dance like that. So that,
yeah,
I could definitely see, like, we will start talking about AI as if it's a person. And I mean, I'm already doing it just looking at that thing that doesn't even look that much like a person, right? Like,
it's weird.
Have you ever been like tempted to tell Siri thank you or please when talking to it, or Alexa?
I do it all the time. I do it in Chat GPT. I'm like, I use manners. And I was actually doing that once, and somebody was watching me and they said, "Why are you using please?" I'm like, I don't know. I'm just trying to be nice to it so I get a good reaction, a good response.
It feels wrong to not do that, right?
Yeah.
Second thing I was thinking is there will be a day that we look back at that commercial of those robots and look at it the same way that we looked at one of those, like the first laptop computers that were this huge box that was like a massive suitcase that you'd have to carry around, and we laugh at it, or the old car phones that were like this big and you're holding this huge thing, and like we laugh at how dumb they were. That's what those robots are going to look like in the future. It's like, can you believe they had a commercial? Look at this thing. And they're going to make fun of them because of how crazy they're like. Whereas when we're looking at it, they're like, how do they make something to do that?
Yeah, we'll be like, man, that thing looks really fake. I can't believe they made him like that back in the day. Here's my question. If they ever develop, or when they develop something like this, and it can essentially become your butler. Well, who was it in the Jetsons, the maid? What was her name?
Rosie?
I don't remember. Rosie. Would you get a Rosie, David, like for your house, if it really helped you like be more efficient and get stuff done quicker, bring you your food, bring you your whatever you need, when you need it, how you need it, all that kind of stuff?
Is that different than a Roomba?
Yeah, I mean, this is all a Roomba does is just vacuum. This thing would literally do anything and everything, like cook your food for you, bring it to you, all that kind of stuff.
I think we would all do that. And the next question would be, as a human, how do you adapt and continue to bring value when you're less valuable than you would have been before? Okay. So like someone was asking if there's a dating joke coming. Well, here you go, Lisa. It's here. One of the reasons I think people are having such a hard time in the dating market and in getting married is that traditional gender roles are very different, because traditionally men were the ones that would go out there and do the work. We'd go work the 10-hour day, the 12-hour day, and come home exhausted. And the woman in the relationship would prepare the food and keep the house clean and get our clothes ready for the next day and take care of the kids. And it was kind of understood what each side was doing. Well, then women started working. And so when the guy comes home exhausted and plops down, she's like, no, I don't get to do that. Why do you get to plop down? You need to get up and do this stuff too. But the guy's wiring is still telling him, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to be happy if I have to do these things that I don't like doing, right? So you have this collision as men have had to try to figure out, how do I remain valuable in a relationship if she doesn't need me for money and protection? Right. Because there's not tigers roaming around like there used to be, or roaming bands of Viking where the woman's like, I need to find a man to keep me safe from these crazy psychos, or I'm going to starve unless I find somebody who's going to bring me food, or I'm going to freeze to death if I don't find a man that can make shelter. We're not needed like that, right? So men have had to adapt, and if they don't adapt, they just end up without much leverage in the dating market. If what you're saying is true and robots do this type of stuff for us, that becomes something that human beings no longer are bringing as value in a relationship. Okay. So if you want to be able to succeed in capitalism and business and making money, if your skill set isn't something that can be replaced by a robot like computer coding, now is the time to start thinking about other things that you could be doing. Now is the time to start thinking about improving yourself on other levels. Like I think most women today would say they would prefer a man that's a little bit more emotionally intelligent than just a traditional provider. Especially if they're working also. So if men are not taking that jump and improving themselves in those areas, we're hurting our own value in the dating market and in that relationship. It's always smarter to ask yourself, how do I provide value in this market? How do I meet the demand that's out there? And I think you pose a really good question there. If we've got people that are doing household chores, if that was part of the value that you were bringing, how are you going to replace that? And that's before we even get into like sex robots and the gross stuff that I'm sure is going to be coming. And then you combine that with AI, so that robot knows exactly what to say to you and how to say it and how to move, right? Like this is creepy stuff, but I guarantee you that'll be one of the first things people do with robots. Just like when the internet was new, you know, we saw the sites that took over the most. You're going to have similar situations. So, having a good understanding of spiritual matters and emotional health, I think, is going to be like at premium in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the truth is the writing's on the wall. We see it coming, but we don't know what's going to happen. And so we have to just be aware of it and be ready for it. And I think robotics is probably going to take a little bit longer to come around. I feel like people have been working on robots for like the last, I don't know, at least since I've been a kid, people have been working on robots, and they're still not like amazing where they can do a bunch of stuff. So, but they continue to get better. But yeah, I think robotics is going to be wild. But AI, like you said, is growing very, very quickly, and we're already seeing a lot of people be affected by it. So pretty crazy stuff. By the way, you guys, if you enjoyed this conversation and this topic and the stuff we talked about tonight, do us a favor, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you come back and watch more for sure. This has been a fun conversation, David. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Kyle, very much for putting the show together and for showing up as always. You're like the mailman, you always deliver. So go give Kyle Ranke a follow on Instagram at Kyle Ranke, and you can find me at davidgreen24.com. If you guys have any interest in accelerator courses, go check out my website. We're going to be putting one together for real estate agents pretty soon here. And I actually had Felicia, Kyle, asking me about if we're going to have another retreat. So that might be something that we should put together, possibly in Tennessee, maybe in Arizona, not quite sure. But if that's something you guys would like to see, send Kyle or I a DM and let us know if you're interested in a retreat and what topics you'd like to see them on, and we'll put one together.
Awesome, you guys. Yep. Let's definitely do that. Reach out to me, reach out to David, and we would love to see you guys all. I hope everyone has a great holiday season, and we'll probably see you back here in a couple weeks. See ya.